Whoa, hit the brakes. You've arrived at the #1 drive-by for American history. Welcome to The Pit Stop. Brought to you by In the Past Lane, the podcast about history and why it matters. Here's Edward T. O'Donnell, your host and historian at large.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Pit Stop, your Monday morning source for history on the go, in just about 5 minutes. Here's what happened in American history this week. Let's start with birthdays. April 9th is the birthday of Paul Robeson. He was born 1898 in Princeton, New Jersey. He grew up to be a great athlete, but an even better singer. But Paul Robeson was also a political activist, deeply involved in the civil rights movement and the struggle for black liberation all around the world. His activism was inspired in part by Marxist and socialist revolutionaries. And let's just say that this brought him a lot of criticism and actually cost him a lot of business, because this was the era of the Cold War. Paul Robeson once said, "As an artist, I come to sing, but as a citizen, I will always speak for peace." April 9th is the birthday of William Fulbright, who was born in Sumner, Missouri, 1905. He was a U.S. Senator representing Arkansas from 1945 to 1974. And much of his focus was on foreign affairs and efforts to keep peace around the world. He once said, quote, "The rapprochement of peoples is only possible when differences of culture and outlook are respected." This idea of promoting peace by fostering tolerance and understanding among nations underlies Fulbright's enduring legacy, the Fulbright Scholarship Program that sends hundreds of young Americans around the world every year to study and teach. April 9th is the birthday of Hugh Hefner, who was born in Chicago, Illinois in 1926. Hugh Hefner founded Playboy magazine in 1953. He once said, "The major civilizing force in the world is not religion. It is sex." Another famous publisher was born this week, Joseph Pulitzer. He was born April 10th, 1847 in Hungary. He got into the newspaper business with the purchase of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch in 1878. 5 years later, he bought the New York World, and from there he built the National News Syndicate. Pulitzer was a pioneer in using sensational news to sell newspapers, a style that came to be called yellow journalism, which is kind of funny when you consider that the highest honor in journalism these days is to win a Pulitzer Prize. April 10th marks the birthday of Francis Perkins, who was born in Boston, Massachusetts in 1880. Perkins grew up to become a sociologist, a social reformer, and an advocate for workers' rights. And in 1933, she became the first woman named to a cabinet position, when Franklin Delano Roosevelt tapped her to be his Secretary of Labor. Francis Perkins once said, "I came to Washington to work for God, FDR, and the millions of forgotten, plain common working men." April 12th is the birthday of Henry Clay. He was born 1777 in Hanover County, Virginia. And Henry Clay was one of the leading political figures in the antebellum era. Henry Clay represented Kentucky in both the House and Senate, and he was one of those guys who wanted to be president, everyone thought would be president someday, who never became president. That cannot be said of this other guy who was also born in Virginia this week. April 13th, 1743 is the birthday of Thomas Jefferson. Because this is the pit stop and I need to be brief, I can't do a full bio of Jefferson. And besides, you probably all know he wrote the Declaration of Independence, served as a diplomat in France, was vice president to John Adams, and then became president in 1801. It's hard to pick just one quote from Jefferson, but let's go with this one, since it kind of gets at the heart of his enduring radicalism. He once wrote, "I hold it that a little rebellion, now and then, is a good thing, and as necessary in the political world as storms in the physical." Want to know more about Jefferson? Check out episodes 25 and 49 of In the Past Lane. Also born on April 13th was Madalyn Murray O'Hair, probably the most famous atheist in American history. She was born April 13th in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And she's best known for a lawsuit that led to a landmark Supreme Court ruling in 1963 that ended official readings of the Bible in public schools. Madalyn Murray O'Hair once said, "2 hands can do more than 1,000 clasped in prayer." April 15th is the birthday of A. Philip Randolph, who was born 1889 in Crescent City, Florida. He's one of the great pre-Martin Luther King civil rights leaders that you rarely hear about, but he was incredibly influential. In fact, he's the guy who first thought of staging a civil rights march on Washington, D.C., way back in 1942. That march never happened, but it was the inspiration for later civil rights leaders who organized the famous march in 1963, where Martin Luther King delivered his I Have a Dream speech. A. Philip Randolph once said, "Justice is never given. It is exacted. And the struggle must be continuous, for freedom is never a final act." All right, let's shift to anniversaries and events. April 9th, 1865, General Robert E. Lee surrendered his army to General Ulysses Grant at Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia. Lee is alleged to have said to his officers, "There is nothing left for me to do but go and see General Grant, and I would rather die 1,000 deaths." April 9th, 1939, that's the day the famed African-American singer, the contralto Marian Anderson, performed an outdoor concert at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. Initially, Anderson had been scheduled to sing at Constitution Hall, but that venue was controlled by the Daughters of the American Revolution, and they made it clear they would not allow a black woman to sing in that hall. And so, Eleanor Roosevelt, don't you just love this woman? She intervenes and basically says, "Screw you, DAR. We don't need your stinking hall and your racism. My husband's the president, and I'm pretty sure I can find a bigger and better venue. Like maybe the Lincoln Memorial." And so, Marian Anderson not only got to perform in D.C., the event was broadcast live on radio from coast to coast. April 14th, 1865, President Abraham Lincoln was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth. And on April 15th, 1947, Jackie Robinson became the first African-American to play in Major League Baseball. Or at least the first to play in modern Major League Baseball, since many African-Americans played in the early version of Major League Baseball in the late 19th century. Okay, almost out of time. Time for the last word. Let's give it to Jackie Robinson. He faced virulent racism when he broke the color line in 1947. And in the face of it, he said, "I'm not concerned with your liking or disliking me. All I ask is that you respect me as a human being." Okay, people, that's your history fix for the week. Now put it in drive and go make your own history.